So we are talking about your thesis, and the most important part about a thesis, think about it with this metaphor. We've got a pebble that represents your counterargument. It is one thing unto itself. And then we have your main argument, which is made up of a stem. That's like the big point you're making. And you're never going to talk about the stem alone. The stem is going to only be talked about through these two different branches, which have to relate back to the stem. So you never actually have a paragraph about your main point, but you have like a branch that develops your main point and then a second branch that develops your main point. So you're really developing it in two different ways. So you start by stating your counterargument briefly. Think of it as a pebble. It's small. And then you state your main argument, specifically one point that will support it, a second point that will support it. All right, so here are some common problems. One problem is that your branches, which I think of as the two supporting reasons, don't actually relate back to your stem. So here the stem talks about ending sexual assault, but the branch talks about making a community so victims of sexual assault don't feel alone. Well, guess what? Victims of sexual assault not feeling alone, it's a great thing, but it doesn't end sexual assault. And so that stem actually does not support the branch. There's a disconnect here. Another problem is that your two branches kind of say the same thing. So when you are pulling quotations, you might have a hard time deciding, should I put it in branch one, which is one section, or should I put it in branch two? Here I've got public conversation curbs sexual assault behavior. And here I have more attention in the media stops assault. Well, isn't more attention in the media kind of like a public conversation? And how are those different? I might kind of find those two too confusing. So you really want to separate out your two different branches. So in two different ways, you're making a point about how to ultimately, in this case, go back to my stem, how to ultimately end sexual assault. And then the last thing is that sometimes a branch might be too specific. So remember, any individual branch, you're only making your argument by debriefing these two specific reasons. Each of these should be several paragraphs and include several different sources. So here's a branch that says, it's proven that news stories on sexual assault has resulted in a significant drop of incidents on college campuses. Sounds like I'm just talking about like maybe one source I read or one study I read. I don't want to just summarize as a whole branch of my argument a single study. I want to bring a few things together. So that branch to me seems too specific. So here is what you're actually going to do. I am going out of this, moving into my research template, and I'm going down to my introduction. The last sentence of my introduction is my thesis. I've got my stem, my counterargument, my stem, however, making sexual assault public. And then I've got my two branches. So specifically, research indicates public conversation. And then my second branch starts here with the and. What I'm going to do is just break this up. So my counterargument is bringing attention to sexual assault can be problematic because ultimately allegations are difficult to prove. I'm going to copy that. I'm just going to paste it right here under a counter argument. And I'm going to make sure to indent that. Come back up here. That was my counter argument. My second thing is making sexual assault accusations public is ultimately a step towards ending sexual assault. That's my stem. And then I'm going to address that in two different ways. Research indicates public conversation. So this is basically going to be my argument. What I'm going to do, copy and paste my argument twice because I'm addressing my argument through my two branches. I'm going to call the first one argument section 1 and my second one argument section 2. And then I'm going to go back up and specify what they are. So argument section 1 talks about ending sexual assault through public conversation. And then my second argument section talks about creating educational programs by connecting victims. So that is not perfect, but notice that both of these talk about ending sexual assault, which is my real argument. that like making these public will end sexual assault, and they get more specific. And so what you're doing today is you are kind of taking your thesis and breaking it down into your counter argument and your two argument sections. That's it.